Let's talk about the Burari deaths. On July 1st, 2018, the bodies of 11 family members spanning 3 generations were found by the police. They were found hanging and gagged with limbs bound. What was first suspected to be a mass murder was later discovered to be an occult ritual gone wrong. The Chundawat family, also known as the Bhatia family by neighbors, lived in a 2-story house in the Burari Sant Nagar neighborhood for around 20 years after leaving their hometown in Rajasthan. On the same morning that the bodies were discovered at 7:15 a.m., one of the neighbors, Guru Charan Singh, noticed that Lalit Chundawat hadn't joined him for their daily morning walk. He also noticed that the family's shop hadn't opened at the usual time. Guru Charan decided to visit the house, and the scene that met his eyes caused him to call the police. The bodies of all 11 family members were found hanging from the ceiling as if they were hanging from a banyan tree. As to be expected, this became a very high-profile case, and the police officials found themselves under quite a bit of stress. Many theories began to make their way around. The family was extremely well loved by the neighbors, so what could have possibly gone wrong? The crime branch was involved, but people began to question the authority of the police when it came to maintaining law and order. Political parties took advantage of the situation to incite people to further their agenda. While all this was going on, the investigating officers made a key find. They discovered 11 diaries in the house that contained some cryptic messages. These messages were written angrily, as if by someone else. This was no longer considered to be a case of murder or suicide. Instead, they were looking at a case of accidental death. As it turned out, this case revolved around black magic, mental health, and toxic and regressive culture. Lalit Chundawat was the youngest of the siblings, but was considered the head of the house and controlled many things. He sustained a head injury and endured a traumatic experience in the past. After his father, Bhopal Singh, passed away, Lalit was diagnosed with PTSD. He didn't speak for a year after this, and people thought he lost his voice. He told family members that he saw his father in his dreams. He claimed that his father told him that if he did a specific prayer at a particular time, that his voice would return. Lalit's voice returned, and his family members put blind faith in his claims. They believed he was able to see his father. This marked the beginning of the psychotic disorder that would be shared by the family. Around 2007, Lalit began to show signs of schizophrenia. He told his family that he was possessed and his father was trying to talk to them. The family's finances grew after listening to Lalit's advice. This not only influenced Lalit's siblings, but the younger generation too. This continued for 11 years, unnoticed by anyone in the neighborhood. This intrigued psychiatrists as well, who were curious as to the fact that even a 15-year-old child in the family believed everything Lalit said to be true without question. Part 2 of the Burari deaths. Lalit convinced the family that one final ritual was necessary. He told them that they had to hang themselves in a specific manner, a message that was once again relayed to him by his deceased father. This is where the diaries came back into play. The angrily written messages opened up a theory that this was perhaps an offering to the spirit of Lalit's father. It's thought that every family member believed they'd survive the hanging and that Lalit's father would come to their rescue. At the crime scene, investigators found traces of a religious ritual that had taken place the night before. Then strange coincidences began to emerge. 11 pipes were found protruding from the house wall. 7 of the pipes were facing downward, which was the same number of women who had died. 4 of the pipes were facing outward, and this was the same number of men who had died. The pipes were also organized in the same sequence as the bodies were found. Many claim the pipes were placed there to allow the spirits to be released. Some theories also focused heavily on the number 11 and that there was something sinister attached to it. A few other theories have spawned regarding what triggered Lalit to perform this ritual. One of the theories is that Lalit's niece was engaged and he was worried that she would spill his secret once she left the home. This made Lalit have the family commit the act. Others believe that Lalit truly thought that his family would come out of this alive and that they would attain some form of spiritual enlightenment. Regardless, the fact remains that in India, mental health needs to be taken seriously and addressed as soon as possible. Toxic masculinity and extreme viewpoints take precedence over mental health, and this is completely unacceptable. Mental health should be talked about, normalized, and care should never take a back seat.
At first glance, you might think you're staring into the faces of 2 innocent teenage boys, but the reality is you are actually staring at the faces of pure evil. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of the Bever family murders. Viewer discretion is advised. And real quick, if you were following Making a True Crimer, go ahead and give this page a follow as it is my backup. Still waiting on my appeal. The Bever family was from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and it consisted of 9 family members. The dad was named David, the mother was named April, then you had 12-year-old Daniel, 7-year-old Christopher, 5-year-old Victoria, 13-year-old Crystal, 2-year-old Autumn, 18-year-old Robert, and 16-year-old Michael. On July 22nd, 2015, around 11:30 p.m., 12-year-old Daniel Bever would make a panicked phone call to 911. He would say, "My brothers, they are attacking us. They are attacking the whole family." They can hear screams in the background, and then the phone goes dead. Police would get to the house fairly quickly. They were able to hear some distant, kind of whispered cries from inside the house. So the officer just charged in. And what they found was something you should only ever see in a horror movie. But sadly, this was reality. They first saw 13-year-old Crystal Bever. She had multiple stab wounds, but she was actually still alive. Upstairs, they found 2-year-old Autumn. Thankfully, she was alive and she wasn't even harmed. But sadly, there were 5 dead bodies in the house. These 5 right here. Crystal was able to tell police it was our brothers, they did this. Teenagers Robert and Michael Bever. They used knives, hatchets, just anything sharp they can get their hands on to stab brutally their whole family. They would later claim to say, "Oh, our parents were just super restrictive. They were strict. They homeschooled us." But neighbors would say that specifically these 2 boys always had some very strange behavior. After massacring their own family, they fled the house. But they would be caught really quickly. This is one of their arrest images. This is the other brother. In a very creepy interrogation, one of the brothers would flat out confess. He pointed them to a flash drive with their plans for the murders. They even found this really disturbing crayon drawing that one of them drew before they murdered their family. I hate when murderers smile. I can't stand it. Ugh. Police would find out they had about 3,000 rounds of ammunition being shipped to the house. They also had plans to continue killing after this. They said they wanted to murder 500 people. They were literally just 2 insane humans, and they would both get life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Etan Pates, which is not at all how I thought his name was pronounced. Viewer discretion is advised. Etan was born on October 9th, 1972 in Manhattan, New York. Sadly, just 6 years later, his life would be cut tragically short. Etan lived in a Soho apartment with his family. He grew up in a very, very loving and nurturing home. On May 25th, 1979, Etan would go missing. His mother, Julie, had given him a $1 bill, and he was planning to go to a corner store to buy a piece of candy and then head to his school bus. This was also the first time he was allowed to walk on his own. And of course something like this would happen. Etan never made it to his bus. He was supposed to be picked up by the bus at West Broadway and Prince Street, but no one claimed to have seen him. His teachers noticed that he wasn't in class either, but they did not alert the principal about it. In fact, it wasn't until just a short time after he was expected home from school that Julie was even aware he was missing. So she called police right away. Now, the parents, Julie and Stanley Pates, obviously they were considered the suspects first. That's pretty normal in this sort of investigation. But police were able to very quickly rule them out. The search for Etan began that very night. They had hundreds of police officers, they used bloodhounds, they searched for weeks, they questioned many people, they put his missing poster all over the place, but nothing ever came of it. Etan was one of the very first children to be featured on the side of a milk carton. Oh, sorry about this. This is Jose Ramos. He was considered the prime suspect for a very long time. He knew the Pates family. He was also friends with someone who used to babysit Etan. He is a convicted child molester. He did live in the area. At points, he was very vague about, oh, maybe I saw him, maybe I took him. but he never ever confessed or admitted to taking or killing Etan. Etan was declared legally dead in 2001. Etan's parents filed a civil suit against him, which they actually won. Now in 2010, police would begin excavating a basement, which is in a building across from where Etan used to live, because they had been given a tip and police dogs had picked up the scent of human remains. They tore the basement up, but nothing was ever found. Finally, in 2012, 51-year-old Pedro Hernandez confessed to the killing of Etan Pates. He was 18 years old at the time, and he likely worked at the convenience store where Etan went. He said he strangled him to death. He then threw Etan in the garbage, like trash. In 2017, he was sentenced to 25 years to life.
Why doesn't anything sit right with you?
You may have heard this story because it's a wild one. This is 16-year-old Brenda Spencer. Now get ready. Within 15 minutes, this girl injured 8 children, a cop, and killed a principal and a custodian. Brenda lived right across from the elementary school. And that past Christmas, her father gave her a .22 rifle. And while these children were walking to school, she started shooting. She shot for about 20 minutes and hit 11 people with her bullets. A reporter actually got her on the phone and asked her, why is she doing this? Her response was, I don't like Mondays. When they called the SWAT team, it actually lasted about 6 hours until they arrested her. She was counted as an adult with 2 murder cases. This occurred in 1979, and in 1980 she pleaded guilty for 2 counts of murder. She has a hearing in 2021.
One was a psychopath and one was an empath. The lives of these conjoined twins will give you chills.
This is the disturbingly sad life of Masha and Dasha, 2 conjoined twins who were removed from their mother's custody to be studied by Soviet psychologists. At birth, the twins were joined at the waist at 180 degrees. They had 2 heads, 2 torsos, 4 arms, and 1 leg each. When they were born, doctors told the mother that she had given birth to a mutant, and the babies had sadly died. This was all a lie in order to get custody of the 2 kids. The state then transported the girls to Moscow, where they were subjected to really disturbing medical experiments. These experiments included packing one twin in ice to bring their temperature down to near fatal levels while observing the temperature changes of the other twin, burning one twin to see what would happen to the other, starving them, depriving them of sleep, electrocuting them, and the list sadly goes on. However, the girls were given an elementary education when rumors started to circulate around Moscow that they had hidden a girl with 2 heads. Masha and Dasha had to be moved for their own safety. Now, as the girls grew up, it became really evident that they had 2 very different personalities. Dasha was known to be an empath, and during her entire ordeal always longed to live a normal life. Masha, on the other hand, was incredibly disobedient. She would often scream, lie, threaten, and sometimes even attack Dasha. Doctors discovered that she displayed narcissistic tendencies. But what would happen next to the 2 girls would be even more disturbing. Part 2 uploading now.